Hello and welcome back to another update. Sadly, there is some bad news in this update, but not to worry, there will be a lot of good ones as well. Let's check them out. Let's begin this update with some of the bad news. I usually like to know the bad news myself before the good ones. That is also the reason why it's taken so long for me to release a new update for the channel. The bad news is about my SSD. It broke down. With this SSD, I lost 2 months of progress on the game, or so I thought. With some hacker magic, I managed to get the project copied to a drive, which was very lucky. I'm not very consistent with my uploading a backup to the cloud, but I will sure do it now. My last backup was like 2 months ago or so, but now I will back the project up way more often. But the sad part is that I lost a lot of time obviously, but also a lot of recordings from this period. And I will go into what type of footage that I lost with some of my highly skilled paint work soon. The reason why the SSD failed I don't really know. It is however about 5 years old. It could have something to do with that. But I'm glad I managed to save the project and some other important stuff on the drive, but I couldn't save it all. That was the bad news. Let's get into the more happy news. Part of the footage I had was me working on how to improve the performance with the rendering. It took me some time, but I managed to find ways to reduce the time it took by reducing the amount of GPU calls. Some methods were called even though I never used them. Nothing I really cared about at the beginning of the project, but it sure makes a big difference now with a lot more stuff is in the game. So, let me show you with my awesome paint skills what I did. Before, when something is needed to be drawn, I would take the object and call the draw function. I'm using a tree here as an example. Here I have a draw function that needs the model, the projection matrix, the texture row, the texture index, texture width, and texture height. This would have been called for every tree in the game. This is not very efficient. All that is really different from each tree is the position and the frame in the animation. So this is the new method I came up with. First, I put all trees in a list and sent that to the new draw method with the projection matrix as well as the offsets for the screen. Now I call this method once, and inside this method I first bind the data that is used for all trees such as the model, the offsets, texture width, and then I bind that data. Then I go through the list and for each tree, binding the position, the matrix, the texture index for that frame and end it with the actual draw call. The program and the texture have already been bound, since that is used not only for all the trees, but for all the animations in the game. There are more changes to this, but instead of going too deep into how it's done, I'ma skip that for now. If someone wants to know more, feel free to leave a comment below. And of course, to show the difference, the actual code will be displayed on the screen. The old code will be to the left and the new one to the right. And because this paint job was done so perfectly, why not smash that like button and hit subscribe to support the channel. Maybe I'll use this talent of mine later and you don't want to miss that. Cheers. Now, back to the update. One thing that I worked on and had annoyed me for quite some time was hitboxes and their collision detection. I always intended to come back to this part of the code and remake it, because I always thought there was too much code for such a simple task. I started running some problems with it and I had to deal with it anyway. I just did a quick search on Google and I found something much easier and better. I used all 4 corners of each hitbox to test, when I really only needed 2 corners of each. Looking at it now, it requires way less calculations than before. Sometimes you just get stuck with tunnel vision and discover it way later down the road. One thing you will be able to do now is to pick up a relic and be able to read about it in the select menu. Just some history I thought would be nice and interesting to have in the game. They will be found in the last level of every biome. There's not much use for the button as of yet, but that is something I've been working on for this update. The in-game button that you will be able to find at certain places is working as intended, which is very nice. I had some issues with offsets and the hitbox bounds, but after spending some time on it, I got it to function correctly. There will be more uses for the lever later in the game. The first use is just to get the player to know that there is a lever and it can be used. I also finished all the levels in the grass biome, so the next update will contain 1 or more new biomes. And there are now 5 levels compared to the 2 from the last update. There will also be new enemies, and there are some enemies that are still not added yet but will make an appearance later down the road. Another thing I worked on to improve was the line of sight. Before I changed it, the check was from each corner of one hitbox to the other, and if just one of those checks failed, there was no line of sight. Which is, if you think about it, quite dumb and unnecessary for this type of game. So I removed a lot of code and made it way simpler. Now it's calculated from the center of one hitbox to the center of the other hitbox. The difference is big in terms of code, and it's also a lot easier to read and check. Hopefully, when this video hits YouTube, the app itself should have been updated too. There are also real ads now in the game. I removed the test ads and replaced them with real ones. Sometimes it doesn't load and sometimes it does. I will work more on this in the next update because ads are still very new to me and I still have some figuring out to do when it comes to this subject. That is all I have for you for this update, folks. Sadly, it took a bit longer than I would have liked, mostly due to the SSD that broke, but anyway, it's all good now and I wish you all to have a good day and I hope to see you guys in the next update. Take care. Bye.